The convoy was dying. 12 vehicles stretched across 2 kilometers of Iraqi desert highway, pinned down by coordinated fire from both sides of the road. 32 Marines trapped between burning Humvees and an enemy that had turned a routine supply run into a precisely executed ambush. Radio chatter crackled with desperate calls for air support that wouldn't arrive for another 18 minutes. 18 minutes they didn't have. And then, cutting through the chaos, one voice broke the pattern. A voice most of them had learned to ignore. "I have a shot." It belonged to Corporal Maya Reeves, the 24-year-old reconnaissance Marine everyone called Iron Wolf, though never to her face and never with respect. She was the woman they tried to hide in the back of every formation, the shooter they'd benched during live-fire exercises, the operator whose warnings they'd dismissed in 3 previous briefings. But in the next 9 minutes, Maya Reeves would do something that would rewrite the rules about who belonged in combat, who deserved to be heard, and what a single precise shot could accomplish when the entire world was on fire. The morning had started with the kind of deceptive calm that experienced operators knew to distrust. Forward Operating Base Falcon sat in the gray pre-dawn light, a collection of concrete barriers and hastily erected structures on the southern edge of Baghdad. Staff Sergeant James Kowalski gathered his Marines in the motor pool, the familiar weight of routine heavy in the air. "Standard supply run to Camp Taji," he announced, pointing at a map spread across the hood of a Humvee. 80 kilometers, highway 1 most of the way. Intel says the route's been quiet for 2 weeks. In and out for hours total. Maya stood at the back of the formation, her M40 rifle slung across her shoulders. She'd studied the route the night before, analyzed satellite imagery, reviewed 3 months of incident reports. Something about the pattern bothered her. The quiet was too consistent, too deliberate. Insurgent activity in the area hadn't decreased. It had simply stopped being visible. "Staff Sergeant," she said, her voice cutting through the morning briefing. "I'd recommend alternate routing through the southern approach." "Highway 1 has." Reeves, Kowalski interrupted, not even looking at her. "We're using Highway 1. It's the fastest route, and it's been secure." "Sir, if you look at the patterns." "I looked at the intel briefing. Corporal, you're not intelligence. You're reconnaissance. Stay in your lane." Around her, she felt the familiar weight of dismissal. Corporal Jake Morrison smirked. Lieutenant David Chun pretended to check his gear. Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb shook his head almost imperceptibly. The message was clear. Iron Wolf was talking again, and nobody was interested. The nickname had started 6 months earlier, during her first week with the platoon. She'd been assigned to reconnaissance after washing out of the scout sniper program. Not because she couldn't shoot, but because, as her instructor had delicately put it, the culture isn't ready for you yet. Translation: you're a woman, and we don't know what to do with you. She'd arrived at Camp Falcon carrying a reputation that preceded her. The female Marine who'd somehow made it through scout sniper training, who'd posted scores that matched or exceeded most of the men, who'd completed the stalking exercises that weeded out 70% of candidates. But scores on a range didn't translate to acceptance in a combat unit. "You look like a wolf," Morrison had said during her first patrol, noting her pale gray eyes and sharp features. "But you're built like a house pet. Iron Wolf, strong on paper, useless in the field." The name had stuck. Meant as mockery, repeated with casual cruelty, it became her identity in the platoon. The woman who looked dangerous but couldn't be trusted with anything important. The shooter who never got to shoot. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to learn, was that Maya Reeves had grown up in Montana's Bitterroot Valley, where her father ran a long-range shooting school for hunters and precision rifle competitors. She'd been holding a rifle since she was 7, calculating wind drift and bullet drop before she could drive. Her father, Thomas Reeves, had been a Marine sniper in the Gulf War. He'd taught her that shooting wasn't about strength or aggression. It was about patience, calculation, and the willingness to see what others missed. Most people look at a target, he'd told her countless times on the range. A real shooter looks at everything around the target. The wind, the mirage, the way the light changes. You have to see the whole picture before you can change it. Those lessons had carried her through Marine boot camp, through infantry training, through the brutal selection process for Scout Sniper School. She'd excelled at every technical aspect: shooting, land navigation, camouflage, observation. But the cultural barriers were insurmountable. Male instructors who didn't know how to integrate a female student. Fellow candidates who viewed her presence as a political statement rather than earned opportunity. A system that had been built by men for men and wasn't ready to change. She'd graduated from the school, barely, but had been quietly shuffled to a reconnaissance unit rather than a sniper platoon. The official reasoning was unit cohesion requirements. The unofficial reasoning was simpler. They didn't want to deal with her. So Maya became a reconnaissance Marine. She went on patrols, pulled security, filed observation reports that commanders rarely read. She carried her M40 rifle, the weapon she'd trained with for months, but was never given priority shooting assignments. When the platoon needed a sniper, they called for Morrison or Webb, even though her scores exceeded theirs. She'd learned to stay quiet, to keep her observations to herself unless directly asked. Speaking up only invited dismissal or ridicule. Better to watch, to wait, to look for the moment when her skills would be undeniable. That moment was coming faster than anyone expected. The convoy rolled out of FOB Falcon at 0630 hours, 12 vehicles in tactical formation. Maya rode in the 8th Humvee, positioned in the middle of the convoy where she'd have minimal tactical impact. Her role was simple: maintain security, report anything unusual, stay out of the way. Lieutenant Chun commanded from the 3rd vehicle. Staff Sergeant Kowalski rode in the 5th. Morrison and Webb were positioned in the lead vehicles where the real shooters belonged. Maya sat behind a .50 caliber machine gun. She wouldn't be allowed to fire unless the situation became desperate. The landscape rolled past, flat desert punctuated by low buildings and irrigation ditches. Highway 1 cut straight through it all, a ribbon of cracked asphalt that had seen too much violence over too many years. Traffic was light, mostly local vehicles that gave the military convoy a wide berth. Maya scanned the terrain with practiced efficiency, her trained eye picking up details that others missed. Abandoned vehicles positioned at regular intervals along the highway. Fresh tire tracks leading off the main road into areas that should have been empty. Small piles of rubble that looked recently arranged rather than naturally accumulated. She keyed her radio. Iron Wolf to command. Observing possible indicators of prepared positions along the route. Recommend enhanced vigilance. Command copies. Chen's voice came back flat and disinterested. Continue mission. Maya bit back her frustration. She made the call. If they chose to ignore it, that was their decision. 20 minutes later, the world exploded. The first IED detonated under the 2nd vehicle in the convoy, a massive blast that flipped the Humvee onto its side and sent a pillar of smoke and debris into the sky. Before the sound even registered, machine gun fire erupted from both sides of the highway, perfectly positioned, perfectly timed, devastating in its coordination. The convoy scattered, drivers instinctively pulling to the sides of the road, Marines dismounting and taking defensive positions behind their vehicles. But the enemy had anticipated this. They'd chosen the killing zone carefully, a straight section of highway with irrigation ditches on both sides that funneled the convoy into a narrow corridor. Contact left. Contact right. The radio exploded with overlapping transmissions. Multiple shooters, both sides of the highway. We need air support. Maya was already moving, rolling out of her vehicle with her M40 and scanning for targets. Through the chaos and dust, she saw the tactical situation crystallizing with terrible clarity. This wasn't an opportunistic ambush. This was a planned operation executed by disciplined fighters who understood military tactics. 20 to 30 enemy fighters on the left side, positioned in buildings and behind irrigation berms. Another 20 on the right. Heavy machine guns at both ends of the kill zone, preventing the convoy from escaping forward or backward. The enemy had created a perfect box, and the Marines were trapped inside it. We need to suppress the machine gun positions. Kowalski's voice cut through the radio traffic. Morrison, Webb, can you engage? Negative, Morrison replied, his voice tight. I've got no angle from here. Too much dust and smoke. Webb, same situation, Staff Sergeant. I can't see the positions clearly enough for a precision shot. Maya's eyes tracked across the battlefield, her training taking over. She could see what the others couldn't. A slight angle created by the way her vehicle had stopped, a gap in the smoke, a direct line of sight to the northern machine gun position that was pouring fire into the convoy's lead elements. Iron Wolf to command, she said, forcing her voice to remain calm. I have visual on the northern MG position. I can take the shot. Silence on the radio. 2 seconds that felt like hours. Then Kowalski's voice, dismissive even in combat. Negative, Iron Wolf. Morrison, reposition and engage. Maya watched Morrison sprint to a new position, saw him set up behind a concrete barrier, saw him fire 3 rounds that impacted uselessly into the dirt berm protecting the enemy gun position. The angle was wrong. He couldn't see the target. Still no joy, Morrison reported. The position's too well protected. The machine gun continued firing, its rounds tearing into the convoy's vehicles with methodical precision. Maya watched a Marine drop, clutching his leg. Another dove behind cover as bullets sparked off metal inches from his head. She made her decision. Iron Wolf to command. I'm taking the shot. Reeves, I said negative, Kowalski began. Maya ignored him. She settled into her shooting position, the familiar weight of the M40 against her shoulder. Through the scope, she saw the machine gun, nest clearly. 2 fighters, one operating the weapon, one feeding ammunition. They were partially concealed behind sandbags, but their positioning left a narrow window of vulnerability. Range, 734 meters. Wind from the west at approximately 8 kilometers per hour, swirling unpredictably in the heat. Temperature, 42 degrees Celsius, creating mirage effects that distorted the target image. The machine gun was elevated slightly, requiring a small adjustment in her hold. Maya controlled her breathing, let her body settle into the position her father had taught her 20 years ago on a Montana range. The chaos of battle faded. The explosions, the shouting, the fear. There was only the target, the wind, the distance. She placed the crosshairs on the machine gunner's upper torso, compensated for wind and distance, and pressed the trigger. The rifle bucked. The machine gunner dropped. The second fighter grabbed for the weapon. Maya chambered another round and fired. He collapsed across the gun. The northern machine gun went silent. Holy shit, someone said over the radio. Who made that shot? Maya was already moving, relocating to a different position. She'd learned from the sample story. Staying in one place made you vulnerable. She moved 15 meters to her left, found a new angle behind a damaged vehicle, and began scanning for additional targets. Iron Wolf, Lieutenant Chin's voice came through, different now, sharp, focused. Confirm you neutralized the northern MG position? Confirmed, sir. Engaging additional targets. Through her scope, Maya saw an RPG team setting up on the western side, preparing to fire into the convoy's command vehicle. She estimated the range, 642 meters, and fired. The RPG gunner fell. His partner attempted to grab the weapon. She fired again. Chin to Iron Wolf. I need the southern machine gun position eliminated. Can you engage? Maya traversed her rifle, searching for the target. The southern position was more difficult, partially concealed behind a building, firing from an elevated window. The angle was extreme, and she'd be shooting through a narrow gap between the building's concrete wall and a metal shutter. Negative clear shot, sir. The position's too well protected. Around her, the battle continued. Marines were returning fire, but the enemy had superior positioning and numbers. Without air support, still 12 minutes out according to the latest radio update, the convoy would be worn down, casualties would mount, and eventually they'd be overrun. Maya studied the southern position through her scope, her mind racing through possibilities. She couldn't shoot the gunner directly, but she could see the ammunition feeder partially exposed as he moved between the weapon and the ammunition cache. Sir, she said, I can't hit the gunner, but I can take out his support. That'll reduce their rate of fire significantly. Do it. Chen ordered without hesitation. Maya settled in, calculated the shot, 698 meters through a gap barely 18 inches wide, and fired. The ammunition feeder dropped. The machine gun's rate of fire immediately decreased as the gunner struggled to reload and fire simultaneously. Good hit, Iron Wolf, Chen confirmed. Keep working that position. Over the next 4 minutes, Maya fired 7 more carefully aimed shots. An enemy squad leader trying to coordinate an assault. A fighter with a radio calling for reinforcements. Another RPG team. A sniper who'd been taking shots at the Marines from a rooftop. 7 rounds. 7 targets neutralized. The tactical situation began to shift. The enemy's coordinated assaults started breaking down as their leadership and heavy weapons were systematically eliminated. The Marines used the breathing room to reorganize, redistribute ammunition, and establish better defensive positions. But the enemy was numerous and determined. They began adapting, moving to more concealed positions, coordinating in smaller groups that were harder to target. Maya was reloading her rifle when she saw it. Movement in a water tower 900 meters to the northeast. A position so far from the main ambush site that most fighters wouldn't have bothered occupying it. But someone had. And from that tower, they'd have an elevated view of the entire battlefield, including the convoy's command vehicle where Lieutenant Sean was directing the defense. Through her scope, Maya caught a glimpse of the threat. An enemy sniper setting up a long-range rifle, taking careful aim at the command vehicle. This wasn't an ordinary insurgent fighter. The way he moved, the equipment he was using, the discipline in his positioning. This was a trained sniper, possibly foreign, definitely experienced. She keyed her radio. Iron Wolf to command. Enemy sniper in the water tower, northeast, approximately 900 meters. He's targeting the command vehicle. Can you engage? Chen asked immediately. Maya studied the shot. 900 meters was at the edge of effective range for the M40. The wind had picked up, gusting unpredictably. The target was partially concealed behind the tower's support structure, visible only in brief moments as he adjusted his position. And she'd be shooting upward at a steep angle, adding complexity to the ballistics. It was an extremely difficult shot. Under ideal conditions, with time to prepare and multiple ranging rounds available, she might attempt it. But in combat, with one chance to succeed before the enemy sniper disappeared or fired first. Negative, sir, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The range is too extreme for a guaranteed hit. I could try, but there's a high probability of miss. She heard voices in the background of Chen's transmission. Kowalski arguing, someone else insisting they had to try something. The enemy sniper was seconds away from firing at the command vehicle, and if he succeeded, the convoy's entire defensive coordination would collapse. Maya kept her scope on the tower, watching the enemy sniper's movements, timing his pattern. He was careful, disciplined, but there was a rhythm to his actions. Every 12 seconds, he shifted position slightly to check his sight picture. During that shift, for perhaps 1 second, his upper torso was fully exposed. 1 second, 900 meters, gusting wind, extreme range. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. The impossible shot isn't about perfect conditions. It's about understanding that impossible just means you haven't found the right angle yet. Sir, Maya said quietly, I need you to trust me. I know I said I couldn't guarantee the hit, but I've been watching his pattern. He's disciplined, but predictable. Every 12 seconds, he checks his sight picture and exposes himself fully for approximately 1 second. If I time it right, I can make the shot. Silence on the radio. The entire battle seemed to pause, waiting. Then Kowalski's voice, tight with skepticism. Lieutenant, with all respect, Rees has never made a shot like this in combat. 900 meters in these conditions? That's beyond her capability. We should focus on suppression fire. Keep his head down until air support arrives. How long until air support? Chen asked. 8 minutes, sir. And how long until that sniper fires at us? No answer. Maya watched through her scope. The enemy sniper was settling in, his rifle stabilizing, his breathing pattern indicating he was seconds from firing. In the background, she could see Marines scrambling, trying to move the command vehicle, but there wasn't enough time. She chambered around, her hands steady despite everything. She calculated the distance one final time, estimated the wind, adjusted her hold to compensate for the upward angle. This was the shot that would define her career, her reputation, possibly her life. Miss, and Lieutenant Chen might die. Miss, and every doubt about her capabilities would be confirmed. Miss, and the nickname Iron Wolf would forever mean what it had always meant. Strong on paper, useless in the field. Lieutenant, Kowalski's voice came through again, more insistent now. I'm recommending we relocate the command post immediately. Don't risk. Staff Sergeant. Lieutenant Chen's voice cut him off, calm but absolute. The voice of a commander making a decision that couldn't be unmade. I've watched Corporal Reeves for 6 months. I've seen her observation reports that we ignored. I've heard her warnings that we dismissed. And I've watched her make 7 impossible shots in the last 10 minutes while the rest of us were scrambling to figure out what was happening. He paused, and Maya could hear the smile in his voice as he spoke the words that would change everything. Iron Wolf, take the shot. Maya's world narrowed to the scope picture. She saw the enemy sniper begin his pattern shift, watched him move into the exposed position. She held her breath, felt her heartbeat slow, squeezed the trigger in the space between one pulse and the next. The rifle fired. The bullet flew across 900 meters of Iraqi desert, fighting wind and gravity and heat distortion every centimeter of the way. Flight time, 1.4 seconds. Through her scope, Maya watched the enemy sniper jerk backward and tumble from the tower. For a moment, the radio was completely silent. Then Staff Sergeant Kowalski's voice, thick with something that might have been respect, confirmed kill. Target down. Jesus Christ, that was one hell of a shot, Iron Wolf. Around the battlefield, Marines who'd been preparing to relocate paused, looked toward Maya's position. The woman they'd dismissed, the shooter they'd benched, had just made a shot that most trained snipers would consider career-defining. But Maya didn't celebrate. She was already scanning for new targets, already adapting to the changing tactical situation. The enemy assault was collapsing, their coordination disrupted, their heavy weapons silenced, their sniper eliminated. The remaining fighters were pulling back, melting into the buildings and irrigation ditches. Air support inbound, 2 minutes, someone reported over the radio. 2 minutes. They'd survived. Maya slowly exhaled and lowered her rifle. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline crash beginning to set in. She'd fired 17 rounds in combat, neutralized 12 enemy fighters, and made a shot that would be talked about in sniper schools for years. But more than that, she'd proven something that shouldn't have needed proving. That skill had no gender, that capability couldn't be dismissed, and that the quietest voice sometimes made the loudest impact. The after-action debrief happened in a dusty room at FOB Falcon 6 hours later. The wounded had been evacuated, the damaged vehicles recovered, and the convoy's cargo, the reason for the entire mission, had been delivered to Camp Taji with a different escort. Lieutenant Chun stood at the front of the room, flanked by Captain Sarah Morrison, no relation to Jake Morrison, and a colonel whose name Maya didn't know. The entire platoon was assembled, still wearing the dust and sweat of combat. 32 Marines went on that convoy. Chun began without preamble. Because of the actions of one of our own, 32 Marines came back alive. We took casualties, 3 wounded, none critical, against a force of approximately 50 enemy fighters in a prepared ambush position. That's a tactical miracle. He pulled up satellite imagery on a laptop, showing the convoy route and the ambush site. Red markers indicated enemy positions that had been neutralized. Corporal Reeves, over the course of 9 minutes, engaged and eliminated 12 enemy combatants from ranges between 640 and 900 meters. She neutralized 2 heavy machine gun positions, multiple RPG teams, enemy leadership elements, and ultimately an enemy sniper who was seconds away from killing me and everyone in the command vehicle. Chun looked directly at Maya. "Stand up, Corporal." Maya stood, her face carefully neutral. "I owe you an apology," Chun said simply. "We all do. For 6 months, You've provided reconnaissance reports that we barely read. You've offered tactical assessments that we ignored. You've carried skills that we refuse to utilize because—" He paused, seemed to struggle with the words. "Because we were more comfortable maintaining the status quo than acknowledging that you might be better at your job than most of us are at ours." Staff Sergeant Kowalski stood as well. "I recommended against using alternate routing this morning. I dismissed your assessment of the threat indicators. I nearly ordered you not to take the shots that saved this convoy." He shook his head. "That was wrong. That was my failure as a leader, and I apologize." Around the room, other Marines were nodding, some looking uncomfortable, others showing genuine respect. Effective immediately, Chun continued, "Corporal Reeves is reassigned as primary sniper for this platoon. Morrison, Webb, you'll work with her to coordinate sniper operations. She's the most qualified shooter we have, and we're going to start treating her accordingly." Jake Morrison stood, his face flushed. To his credit, he walked directly to Maya and extended his hand. "I was wrong about you. Dead wrong. That shot from the water tower." He shook his head. "I couldn't have made that shot. Maybe nobody could have accepted you. I'm sorry for the way I treated you." One by one, other Marines approached, some apologizing, others simply expressing respect, a few asking technical questions about the shot she'd made. The wall of dismissal that had defined her experience in the platoon was crumbling. But then the colonel spoke, his voice cutting through the moment. "Corporal Reeves, I'm Colonel Frank Patterson, Battalion Operations Officer. That shot you made, the one from 900 meters on the enemy sniper, I need to know something. You told Lieutenant Chun you couldn't guarantee the hit. What changed?" Maya met his gaze steadily. "With respect, sir, I said I couldn't guarantee the hit under the conditions as they existed when he first asked. But I've been observing the target, learning his pattern. When I had enough information to calculate the probability of success, I requested the shot. And what was the probability? 75%, sir. Maybe 80. High enough to risk, but not certain. And if you'd missed, then Lieutenant Chun would have moved the command vehicle, and we'd have tried something else, sir. But doing nothing wasn't an option." Patterson studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "That's the right answer. Calculated risk based on solid observation and honest assessment of capability." He turned to Chun. "Lieutenant, I'm forwarding a commendation packet for Corporal Reeves. Bronze Star with Valor. What she did today was extraordinary." He looked back at Maya. "I'm also recommending you for immediate reassignment to a scout sniper platoon. We need operators with your level of skill in positions where they can make the maximum impact. You've earned that opportunity, and this time, the culture will adapt to you or people will be replaced." Maya felt something release in her chest. A tension she'd carried for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like without it. Recognition, not just acceptance, but active recognition that her skills mattered. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. After the briefing ended, Maya found herself on the roof of the barracks building, looking out across the desert. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her of Montana evenings. "You did good today, kid." She turned to find Chin climbing through the roof access hatch. "Just did my job, sir." "No," Chin said, joining her at the edge. "You did far more than your job. You saved 32 lives, including mine. You proved that talent and skill matter more than outdated prejudices. And you made one of the most remarkable shots I've ever witnessed." He paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sir." "Why didn't you quit? You could have requested transfer months ago, gone to a unit that might have appreciated your skills. Why stay where you weren't wanted?" Maya was quiet for a moment, watching the sun touch the horizon. "Because my father taught me that the hardest shots are the ones worth taking. If I'd left, if I'd given up, it would have confirmed everything they believed about women in combat roles. That we can't handle adversity. That we don't belong." She turned to face him. "I stayed because someone had to prove them wrong. It just happened to be me." She nodded slowly. "Your father sounds like a wise man. He was a Marine sniper in the Gulf War, sir. He taught me everything I know about shooting. About patience. About seeing what others miss." She smiled slightly. "He also taught me that the nickname doesn't matter. Iron Wolf, Ghost Girl, whatever people want to call you, it's just noise. What matters is whether you can make the shot when it counts. You made the shot, Corporal, today and every day." Chen extended his hand. Welcome to the team. The real team, where your voice matters and your skills are utilized. As they shook hands, Maya thought about the journey that had led to this moment. The years of training, the months of dismissal, the morning when she'd warned about the ambush and been ignored, the 9 minutes when everything had changed. The nickname Iron Wolf had been meant as mockery, strong on paper, useless in the field. But somewhere during that firefight, the meaning had transformed. She was iron now, tested, proven unbreakable. And she was a wolf, patient, calculating, deadly when the moment required. They doubted her presence. They questioned her capability. They tried to silence her voice and minimize her impact. Until the commander turned and said those 4 words that acknowledged what she'd always known about herself. Iron Wolf, take the shot. 3 months later, Maya shipped out to a new assignment with a scout sniper platoon. Her reputation preceded her. The woman who'd made the 900-meter shot, who'd saved an entire convoy, who'd proven that the only thing that mattered in combat was whether you could do the job. Her new team leader was a grizzled gunnery sergeant named Robert Hayes who'd been a sniper for 15 years. He met her at the flight line, looked her over with a critical eye, and said, "I read your file. Impressive shooting. But stats on paper don't mean much to me. I judge people on what they do in the field." "Fair enough, Gunny," Maya replied. "We've got a mission tomorrow. Overwatch for a raid on a suspected weapons cache. You'll be primary shooter. I'll be your spotter." He paused. "No special treatment because of your combat commendations. No lowered expectations because of your gender. You perform or you're gone. Clear. Crystal clear, Gunny." Hayes almost smiled. "Good. We're going to get along fine, Iron Wolf. Now grab your gear. We've got a briefing in 30 minutes. As Maya followed him across the tarmac, her rifle case over her shoulder, she thought about how far she'd come from that Montana range where her father had first taught her to shoot. She thought about the months of dismissal at Camp Falcon. She thought about 9 minutes on an Iraqi highway when everything had changed. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more people to convince, more doubts to overcome, more shots that needed to be made when failure wasn't an option. But she'd proven to herself and to everyone watching that she belonged here, not despite being different, but because her differences made her uniquely valuable. She was Iron Wolf, and when the commander said, "Take the shot," she'd do what she'd always done. She'd make it count. The mission brief was standard: establish overwatch on a compound suspected of housing weapons and explosives. Provide security for the assault force. Engage targets as necessary. But as Hayes spread the map across the briefing table and began explaining the tactical plan, Maya noticed something. A water tower northeast of the target building. An irrigation ditch that provided covered approach from the south. Enemy movement patterns that suggested organized security rather than casual presence. "Gunny," she said quietly, "can I make an observation?" Hayes looked at her, his expression unreadable. The rest of the team, 4 other snipers and spotters, turned to listen. This was the moment. She could stay quiet, play it safe, avoid the risk of being dismissed again. Or she could speak up, offer the tactical insight she saw, and risk being labeled as the woman who talked too much. She met Hayes's eyes and made her choice. The target building has 3 potential Overwatch positions that aren't in the current plan. If the enemy has organized security and their patterns suggest they do, those positions will be occupied. We should plan for contingencies. Hayes studied the map, traced the routes she'd identified, and nodded slowly. "Show me." Over the next 20 minutes, Maya walked the team through what she saw. The tactical vulnerabilities, the likely enemy positions, the adjustments they could make to improve their chances of success. When she finished, Hayes looked around the room. "Anyone have issues with Iron Wolf's assessment?" Silence. "Good. Because she's right. We'll adjust the plan accordingly." He turned to Maya. "You've got good eyes, Corporal. Keep using them." As the briefing continued, Maya felt something settle into place, a sense of belonging that had been missing at her previous unit. These were professionals who judged her on capability, not gender, who listened to her observations because they were accurate, not because they had to. This was what she'd been fighting for. Not special treatment, not lowered standards, Just the opportunity to do her job without barriers, with her voice valued and her skills utilized. The next morning, as the team moved into position in the pre-dawn darkness, Maya set up her rifle and scanned the target area through her scope. Everything was exactly where she'd predicted. Enemy security in the water tower, guards in the irrigation ditch, a roving patrol that passed by every 12 minutes. Iron Wolf, confirm you have eyes on target, Hayes said quietly from beside her. Confirmed, Gunny. 3 targets visible, multiple positions. Ready to engage on your mark. The assault force was moving into position, waiting for the signal to breach. The enemy security was unaware, confident in their prepared positions. Maya's finger touched the trigger lightly, her breathing steady. She'd made this shot 1,000 times before, in training, on ranges in combat. This wasn't the longest shot she'd ever attempted, or the most difficult, but it mattered just as much as that 900-meter shot on an Iraqi highway. Every shot mattered. Every mission counted. Every time she proved her worth, she made it easier for the women who would come after her. All elements, stand by, came the voice over the radio. Execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Iron Wolf, Hayes said quietly. Take the shot. Maya fired. The mission began. And somewhere in Montana, she imagined her father would be smiling, knowing that everything he'd taught her had led to this moment. The impossible shot, the right angle, the willingness to see what others missed, and the certainty that when it mattered most, she would make it count.